That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over Fort Huachuca, Arizona, casting long shadows across the dusty training grounds. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention in her camouflage utilities, the fabric already clinging to her skin from the pre-dawn humidity. Her boots sank slightly into the hard-packed earth, polished to a dull shine despite the grit. Around her, the K-9 unit assembled in precise formation, handlers with leashes taut, dogs sitting alert, German shepherds, Belgian Malinois, their ears pricked forward, breath steady in the cooling air. The scent of creosote bushes mingled with the faint metallic tang of rifle oil from the adjacent range. "Unit, attention!" barked Captain Harlan Reed, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. He paced the line, his own boots thudding rhythmically against the ground. Reed was a veteran of 2 deployments, his face etched with the lines of desert campaigns, eyes sharp under the brim of his patrol cap. "This is scent detection drill. We track simulated IEDs in open terrain. No deviations. Precision is our doctrine." Elena nodded crisply, her hand resting on the top of Rex's head. The 7-year-old Malinois leaned into her touch, his black and tan coat warm under her fingers. Muscles coiled but calm. They'd been partners for 4 years, through patrols in dusty Afghan villages, through the endless nights of base security rotations. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was her shadow, her instincts made flesh. She could feel his subtle shift in weight, the way his nostrils flared at the first hint of wind, carrying unfamiliar odors. In the rigid world of the Army's K-9 program, bonds like theirs were forged in silence, tested in obedience. The unit moved out as one, handlers issuing low commands in clipped tones. "Forward. Heel." The dogs trotted in sync, leashes humming with controlled tension. Elena kept Rex close, her eyes scanning the horizon, where the Sonoran desert stretched into haze. This was routine. Embed mock explosives in the sand. Let the dogs work the grid, report hits. It built trust in the chain, handler to dog to handler, all under the watchful eye of command. Fort Huachuca's K-9 detachment prided itself on that order, a microcosm of the Army's unyielding structure. Promotions hinged on flawless execution. Lapses could end careers. They reached the designated search zone, a barren stretch of arroyo marked by orange cones. The air hummed with the distant thump of a Black Hawk warming up on the helipad, rotors slicing the morning calm. Reed halted the unit. "Vasquez, you take grid Alpha. Ramirez Beta. 5 minutes per sector. Report findings immediately." "Yes, sir," Elena replied, her voice steady. She unclipped Rex's leash, giving the hand signal, "Work." He bounded forward, nose low to the ground, tail low and focused. Elena followed at a measured pace, her radio clipped to her shoulder, crackling faintly with static. The desert floor was a mosaic of cracked earth and sparse thorns, the heat already building under her vest. Rex worked methodically, quartering the area in overlapping sweeps, his paws kicking up small puffs of dust. Halfway through the grid, something shifted. Rex paused, then circled back, digging at a spot near a cluster of weathered rocks. His claws scraped rhythmically, sand flying in arcs. Elena's pulse quickened, not from alarm, but from the quiet certainty that Rex had locked on. "Easy, boy," she murmured, kneeling beside him, but this wasn't the chalky scent of the training simulant. Rex's intensity was different, primal. He whined low, paws working faster, unearthing a layer of loose soil that looked undisturbed for years. "Vasquez, status." Reed's voice cut over the radio, impatient. "Possible hit, sir. Rex is committed." She kept her tone neutral, professional. Handlers didn't speculate, they reported facts. But as Rex's digging deepened, Elena's gloved hand brushed something solid, not the expected plastic canister. Cold metal rusted at the edges. She froze, heart thudding against her ribs. "Sir, this isn't simulant. Rex has something real." The unit converged quickly, boots crunching in unison. Reed pushed through, his face tightening as he crouched. "Stand down, Sergeant. That's not your call." He signaled Ramirez to pull Rex back, but the dog resisted, growling softly, not at threat but insistence. Elena's hand tightened on the leash, a flicker of conflict in her chest. Protocol demanded she yield. Rex's read was the mission's core. "Captain, with respect, he's never false alarmed like this." Her words came out even, but her eyes met his, holding steady. Around them, the other handlers exchanged glances, silent witnesses to the first crack in the morning's order. The desert wind picked up, whispering through the creosote, carrying the faint, acrid scent of old earth turned. Reed straightened, jaw set. "Secure the area. No one touches it until EOD arrives." He turned to Elena, voice low. "You followed procedure until you didn't. Explain why your dog is off script." Elena saluted, palm crisp against her brow, but inside, the bond with Rex pulsed stronger than any order. He'd detected what the drills never simulated, truth buried deep. As the unit cordoned off the site, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze, the hum of approaching vehicles filled the air. What Rex had unearthed wasn't just metal, it was a question, one that would demand answers from a chain of command, long settled on silence. The morning's routine had fractured, and in that moment, Elena Vasquez felt the weight of what obedience might cost. Rex sat at her feet, eyes locked on hers, unwavering. The base's distant bugle call echoed, marking the hour, but for the K-9 unit, time had shifted. Investigations would follow, files dusted off from archives 20 years cold. And at the center, a handler and her dog, bound by loyalty that no rank could command. By midday, the site swarmed with specialists, EOD techs in heavy gear, their detectors beeping steadily. Elena watched from the perimeter, Rex leashed but alert, his nose twitching toward the dig. Captain Reed briefed the base commander over a secure line. His words clipped. "Unidentified artifact, sir. K-9 positive. Handler insists it's viable." The commander, Colonel Ellis, arrived in a Humvee, dust clouding behind. He was a broad man, silver at the temples, known for upholding regs without mercy. "Vasquez," he said, approaching her directly, "walk me through it." She recounted the drill step by step. The grid, Rex's behavior, the anomaly. No embellishment, just facts, her training's imprint. Ellis nodded, eyes on the pit where techs worked under floodlights, jury-rigged against the rising sun. This could be nothing, or it could be contamination from old exercises. But your dog's nose doesn't lie, neither should you. As the team extracted the object, a sealed canister, army markings faded but legible, Elena felt the first ripple of consequence. Whispers spread through the unit, rumors of a long-buried incident, a training mishap covered in the 90s. Rex pressed against her leg, sensing her tension, his warmth a quiet anchor. That evening in the dim kennel lights, Eleanor brushed Rex's coat, the wet fur from his post-mission rinse gleaming under the bulb. "Good work today," she whispered, her voice the only softness in the day's discipline. Outside, the desert cooled, stars pricking the sky. But sleep wouldn't come easy. The canister's contents were en route to forensics, and with it, questions that pierced the Army's ordered facade. What began as a dig in the sand had unearthed more than metal. It had stirred ghosts, forcing a reckoning with a past the institution had sealed away. Elena knew, deep in the loyalty that tied her to Rex, that following orders now meant facing what they'd all ignored. The chain of command would test her, but the dog's unerring sense had already chosen the path. The next dawn broke with the sharp crack of reveille echoing across Fort Huachuca, pulling the K-9 unit from their bunks like a well-oiled mechanism. Elena Vasquez rose without hesitation, the cot's springs creaking under her as she swung her legs to the concrete floor. The kennel barracks smelled of polished leather and damp earth from the night's irrigation, a routine that grounded her after the previous day's upheaval. She dressed in fresh utilities, the olive-drab fabric starched crisp, insignia pinned with precision. Rex was already stirring in his run, paws clicking against the chain link as he watched her through the gate. "Steady, partner," she said softly, unlatching the door. He trotted out, tail wagging once in acknowledgement, his coat still carrying the faint scent of desert sand. Their morning ritual began. A quick inspection of his paws for thorns, a check of his harness for wear. In the Army's K-9 program, handlers were drilled to treat their dogs as extensions of the unit, loyal, replaceable assets. But Elena had long since crossed that line. Rex had saved her life twice in the field, once by alerting to a hidden cache in a wadi that would have shredded their convoy. Their bond wasn't sentiment. It was survival, etched in shared silences and unyielding trust. The unit assembled in the chow hall, trays clattering under fluorescent lights. Handlers sat in ranks, steam rising from mugs of black coffee, the air thick with the sizzle of eggs on the grill. Captain Reed entered last, his presence drawing eyes like a magnet. He nodded to the group, then fixed on Elena. "Vasquez, report to the S3 shop after breakfast. Colonel Ellis wants a full debrief." "Yes, sir," she replied, fork pausing mid-air. The other handlers, Ramirez with his easy grin, Specialist Torres nursing a bandaged hand from yesterday's grid, shot her sidelong glances but said nothing. Protocol silenced speculation. The chain of command absorbed shocks like a buffer. In the S3 operations tent, the air was cooler, filtered through humming AC units, maps pinned to boards showing deployment rotations and threat assessments. Colonel Ellis stood behind a metal desk, a tablet in hand displaying grainy photos of the canister. Cylindrical, olive drab, stamped with faded Ordnance Corps markings from 1998. "Sergeant, sit." He gestured to a folding chair, his voice even like briefing a patrol. Elena took the seat, back straight, hands folded. "Sir, forensics prelims came back overnight. It's a sealed sample kit, chemical residue from an old defoliant test, buried during a classified exercise 2 decades ago. The Army wrote it off as lost materiel, case closed in '99. Ellis slid the tablet across. The images showed corroded seals, labels warning of volatile compounds. "Your dog flagged it clean, but it's a relic. Could be inert, could explain why it was never logged." Rex's red replayed in her mind. The intensity, the whine that cut through training noise. "Sir, Rex doesn't distinguish age. If it's there, he finds it. This wasn't simulant residue, it was active." Ellis's eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but calculation. He was a career officer, risen through ranger school and staff positions where loose ends threatened ops. Understood. But protocol requires confirmation. EOD's running spectro analysis today. Until then, the site's quarantined, and your unit's on light duty. No field work. She nodded, the order settling like dust. Light duty meant kennel maintenance, gear checks, busy work that itched against her instincts. But obedience was the Army's spine. Questioning it publicly could flag her file. As she left the tent, the morning sun glared off Humvees parked in neat rows, their hoods warm already. Rex waited outside, leashed to a post by Ramirez, who handed over the lead with a nod. He didn't eat much, kept staring at the gate. Elena crouched, running a hand along Rex's flank. His ribs rose steadily, but his eyes held that alert gleam, as if the desert's secret still tugged at him. "We'll walk it off," she murmured, clipping on the lead. They headed to the perimeter trail, a gravel path skirting the base's edge, where Saguaros stood sentinel against the horizon. The crunch under her boots synced with Rex's paws, a rhythm that cleared her head. Halfway around, her radio buzzed. Vasquez, return to kennels, immediate. Reed's tone was taut, laced with urgency. She reversed course, Rex matching her stride without prompt. Back at the barracks, the unit was gathered around a whiteboard, faces drawn. Reed paced, a printout in hand. Update from forensics. The canister's not inert, trace volatiles, enough to contaminate a grid if breached, and markings tied to Project Thornwood, a 90s herbicide trial buried after environmental fallout. Official line was disposal, logs show otherwise. Torres whistled low, quickly stifling it under Reed's glare. So what? Cover up. Stow it, Reed snapped. Colonel's ordering a full review, but command's clear, no leaks. This stays in-house until JAG weighs in. His gaze landed on Elena. Vasquez, your dog's the catalyst. You're sidelined from the investigation team. Observe only. The words hit like a withheld promotion. Sideline the handler whose partner broke the find. Rex pressed against her leg, sensing the shift, a low rumble in his throat. Sir, Rex's testimony is key. He's tracked worse in worse conditions. Reed's jaw tightened. Your loyalty's noted, Sergeant, but the chain decides. Obey, or it questions your fitness. The unit dispersed to tasks, cleaning runs, logging vet checks, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Elena led Rex to his enclosure, the gate clanging shut behind him. She watched him settle on his bed, head tilting as if asking why. The dilemma coiled in her gut: follow orders, let the review fade into reports, or push for truth, risking her rank, her place in the unit. By afternoon, the base hummed with subtle activity, MPs patrolling the site, a JAG officer arriving in plain clothes, notebook in hand. Eleanor reported to the observation post, a shaded overlook with binoculars trained on the dig. From there, she saw techs in hazmat suits probing deeper, unearthing fragments, shattered vials, yellowed manifests. One sheet fluttered free before being secured. Names, dates, a signature from a long-retired major. Her radio crackled again. Vasquez, Colonel's office, now. She arrived to find Ellis with the JAG rep, a wiry major named Hale, reviewing files on a secure laptop. Sergeant, Ellis said, the manifest lists discrepancies. Equipment logged out, never returned. Your find matches a cold case, missing samples from Thornwood, but reopening means pulling archived personnel files, some still active. Hale leaned forward, eyes sharp. And your dog's role? Handlers don't testify, but anomalies like this, they demand verification. Elena met his gaze. Rex verified it yesterday, sir. If the files show sabotage or negligence, ignoring that dishonors the unit. Ellis exchanged a look with Hale, the room's air thick with the weight of decision. Outside, the wind carried the distant bark of another dog on drill, a reminder of the order they all served. But Elena felt the fracture widening, duty pulling one way, the conscience forged, with Rex pulling another. The Army's history, buried like the canister, now demanded excavation, and she stood at the edge, leash in hand, wondering how deep the dig would go. As evening fell, the base lights flickered on, casting long shadows over the kennels. Eleanor fed Rex his ration, kibble clinking into the bowl, his jaws working steadily. The day's orders had confined her, but the bond between them whispered of paths untaken. Tomorrow's review would test it all, forcing choices that no drill could prepare for. In the quiet, with the desert's chill seeping in, she knew. Loyalty to the chain was iron, but to her partner it was unbreakable. The fluorescent hum of the colonel's office lingered in Elena's ears as she stepped into the night, the door clicking shut behind her with finality. Fort Huachuca's evening routine enveloped her. The distant murmur of generators, the sharp scent of creosote carried on a cooling breeze, and the rhythmic patrol of boots on the perimeter fence. Rex waited at the kennel gate, his silhouette etched against the sodium lights, ears perked at her approach. She unlatched the run, and he rose to meet her, nose nudging her hand in quiet greeting. No exuberance, just the steady assurance of their partnership. "Sit," she commanded softly, and he obeyed, eyes reflecting the glow of her flashlight. Eleanor ran a gloved hand over his ears, checking for ticks from the day's confinement. The Army's K-9 vets had cleared him earlier, vitals steady, no signs of stress, but she knew better. Rex's calm masked the same undercurrent she felt. A pull toward the unanswered, the buried. "Rest up, boy. We've got orders to follow." Her words were for him as much as herself, a ritual to reinforce the chain that bound them both. Sleep came in fragments that night, broken by the base's nocturnal pulse. The low whine of a transport truck shifting gears, the occasional bark from another run echoing isolation. By 0500, reveille pierced the dark, and Elena was up, folding her blanket with precise corners, the cot's frame groaning in protest. She dressed in the dimness, the utility blouse's Velcro rasping as she secured her name tape. Rex's breakfast followed. Measured scoops of kibble into his bowl, water fresh from the hose, the splash cutting the morning chill. He ate methodically, tail thumping once against the concrete. The unit mustered in the armory yard, dew still beading on the Humvee's windshields. Captain Reed conducted roll call, his voice carrying over the assembly like a drill sergeant's cadence. "Vasquez, here, sir." The responses rolled out crisp, a litany of discipline amid the gathering mist. Ramirez stood at her flank, his own Malinois Luna sitting statue still beside him. No words passed between them. The sidelining order hung unspoken, a shadow over the formation. "Light duty continues," Reed announced, clipboard in hand. "Kennels for handlers 1 through 4. Gear inventory for the rest. Colonel's review board convenes at 0900. No discussions outside chain." His eyes swept the line, lingering on Eleanor. She held her posture, chin level, but felt the weight of observation, like a scope sighting in. They dispersed to tasks, the gravel crunching under boots in synchronized steps. Elena and Ramirez headed to the kennels, leashes in hand for the morning exercise walk. The trail wound through scrub oak, the air sharp with sage after the night's damp. Rex led with purpose, nose questing low, while Luna trailed, her gait more playful. "Heard Jags pulling files from D.C., Ramirez murmured, keeping his volume low, eyes forward. "Thornwood wasn't just a test. Word is it poisoned a whole sector. Civilians off base complained, but brass buried the reports." Elena glanced at him, her stride unbroken. "Speculations off limits, Ramirez. We report, they decide." He nodded, but the tension lingered, a crack in the unit's facade. Rex paused at a familiar outcrop, sniffing the wind that carried faint echoes of yesterday's dig site. Elena tugged the leash gently. "Heel." He complied, but his head turned back, a subtle defiance mirroring her own restraint. At 8:30, the summons came over the intercom. "All K-9 personnel to Briefing Room Alpha, immediate." The room was a squat prefab. Walls lined with threat posters and rotation charts, the air conditioned to a sterile chill. Colonel Ellis stood at the front, flanked by Major Hale and a civilian analyst from Environmental Compliance, her laptop open to redacted documents. The unit filed in, taking seats on metal benches that creaked under their weight. Rex and the other dogs were secured outside, their muffled whines filtering through the vents. "Attention!" Ellis barked, and the room snapped upright. "At ease." He paced the narrow aisle, boots echoing on linoleum. "Forensics confirmed. The canister from Grid Alpha contains residual Agent Orange derivatives. Experimental batch from Project Thornwood, 1998. Buried post-trial to evade EPA audits. Manifest discrepancies point to unauthorized disposal. This isn't a mishap, it's a potential Article 92 violation. Dereliction of duty." Murmurs rippled, quickly quelled by Hale's raised hand. The JAG Major stepped forward, his uniform impeccable, voice measured. "We're reopening the file. Archive personnel from the original team, handlers, officers, will be interviewed. But containment is priority. No media, no external contacts. Sergeant Vasquez, your dog's detection initiated this. You'll demonstrate Rex's capabilities for the board. Eleanor's pulse steadied. This was protocol, a chance to affirm Rex's role without overstep. Yes, sir. When and where? Post-brief, controlled demo in the yard. Ellis's gaze hardened. Understand. This review tests the institution, not just individuals. Loyalty means silence until cleared. The briefing dissolved into assignments, log reviews for Ramirez, site security for Torres. Elena led Rex to the demo area, a fenced enclosure with buried simulants for calibration. Techs from EOD observed from behind clipboards, detectors at the ready. She signaled Rex to work. Search. He moved out, nose to ground, quartering the plot with mechanical precision. The board watched, Ellis's pen tapping his knee. At the third sweep, Rex locked on a fresh simulant, digging with controlled urgency. Elena marked the spot, voice neutral over the radio. Hit confirmed. The analyst nodded, murmuring about scent thresholds and false positives. But as Rex sat, alerting, Elena caught Hale's eye, a flicker of something beyond procedure, perhaps doubt on the old file's closure. By noon, the demo wrapped, and the unit broke for chow. In the mess hall, steam rose from tureens of stew, the clatter of trays a brief respite. Elena sat with her section, Rex at her feet under the table, his head on her boot. Whispers circled. A retired major from Thornwood now consulted for contractors, logs showing samples lost during a base expansion. If it's negligence, Torres said under his breath, heads roll, even colonels. Focus on your plate, Elena replied, though her mind raced. The moral pull tightened. Obey the silence, let Jag handle the ghosts, or advocate for full disclosure, honoring Rex's find and the potential victims beyond the wire. Afternoon brought the first interview, Hale in a side office, tape recorder whirring. Walk me through the dig again, Sergeant. Every detail, your commands, the dog's response. Elena recounted it verbatim, hands steady on the table. Rex circled twice before committing, no wind interference. His indicate was textbook. Hale probed. Timelines, unit logs, any prior anomalies in the grid. She answered clean, but inside the dilemma gnawed. Truth demanded more than recitation. It required pushing the chain to unearth the full rot. As the sun dipped, casting orange across the yard, Elena walked Rex through cool-down laps. The desert's hush amplified the base's sounds, a helicopter's fading rotor wash, the snap of flags in the breeze. Tomorrow's board expansion would include external auditors, rippling the secrecy. She felt the reckoning building, public now in the eyes of command, where one handler's conscience could force reform or fracture careers. In the kennel twilight, she secured Rex, his eyes meeting hers through the gate, the bond held firm, a silent vow amid the orders. What the dog had dug up wasn't just a canister, it was accountability, stirring a 20-year file that the army could no longer ignore. Elena turned out the light, the click echoing her resolve, duty and morality colliding, with loyalty as the only true command. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The first light of dawn filtered through the kennel slats, painting thin stripes across the concrete floor. Elena Vasquez moved with the quiet efficiency of habit, her boots whispering against the grit as she filled Rex's water bowl from the spigot outside. The metal rang softly against the basin, water splashing in a steady stream that cut the night's lingering chill. Rex rose from his bed, stretching his forelegs with a low huff, his nails clicking as he approached. She scratched behind his ears once, a brief acknowledgement, before clipping on his leash. "Up and at it," she said, voice level, the words more command than comfort. The base stirred around them as they stepped out, the reveille horn blaring from the parade ground, pulling the fort into motion. Humvees rumbled to life in the motor pool, their engines growling low, while handlers from other units jogged in formation, breaths visible in the crisp air. Elena led Rex toward the exercise yard, the leash taut but yielding, his pace matching hers without need for correction. The previous day's interviews had left a residue in her mind. Hale's probing questions, the redacted files flashing on his screen, but she pushed it down. Duty started with the routine, exercise, feed, report. Anything else was noise until ordered otherwise. In the yard, fenced with chain link rattling faintly in the breeze, Eleanor unclipped Rex and gave the signal, free. He bounded to the far side, circling the perimeter with purposeful trots, nose occasionally dipping to test the dew-kissed grass. She watched from the gate, arms crossed, the cool metal pressing into her sleeves. The demo from yesterday replayed in her thoughts, the board's nods, Ellis's measured approval of Rex's precision. But sidelining her from the core investigation chafed like an ill-fitted harness. Rex had initiated this. Excluding his handler felt like questioning the tool itself. "Vasquez," a voice called from the path. Specialist Torres approached, his utilities dusted from an early gear check, Luna at his heel. "Reed wants you at the ops tent. Jag's got prelims from the archives." She nodded, whistling sharply for Rex. He returned instantly, sitting at her boot, tongue lolling once before stilling. "On me," she said, and they fell in step with Torres, the trio moving through the base's waking rhythm. The ops tent loomed ahead, canvas flaps tied back, the interior lit by portable lamps that hummed against the morning grey. Captain Reed stood inside, poring over a stack of printouts with Major Hale, the air thick with the scent of fresh ink and stale coffee from a pot on the side table. "Report," Reed said without looking up, his finger tracing a line on the top sheet. Elena saluted, palm snapping to her brow. "Sergeant Vasquez, reporting as ordered, sir." Rex sat beside her, alert but silent, his presence a subtle pressure against her leg. "At ease." Hale gestured to a chair, his uniform creased from an overnight flight, eyes shadowed under the brim of his cap. "Archives from '98 confirm Thornwood's scope. Defoliant trials for arid ops, meant to clear brush without fire risk, but samples went missing post-trial. Logged as destroyed, site certified clean. Your canister's serial matches one of those." Reed slid a folder across. Inside, faded memos detailed the original team, a major overseeing disposal, handlers certifying the grid, an environmental officer signing off. No photos, just typewritten names and stamps, yellowed edges curling. "Discrepancies," Reed added, voice clipped. "The major retired in '02, clean record, but cross-checks show he consulted for agro firms after ties to the compounds." Elena scanned the pages, her gloved finger steady on the text. Rex shifted, sniffing the air, perhaps catching the faint chemical trace from the folder's handling. "Sir, if the burial was unauthorized, it risks more than the site. Groundwater, adjacent ranges, civilians farm that arroyo edge." Hale's pen tapped the table once, a measured rhythm. "Precisely. EPA's been looped in quietly. They're demanding full excavation. But command's weighing containment versus disclosure. Reopening means notifying dependents of exposed personnel, potential claims." He paused, eyes on her. "Your input, Rex's detection. Could he verify deeper burial? Multiple sites?" The question hung, a test wrapped in protocol. Elena met his gaze, weighing the order against the pull of full truth. Rex's nose had pierced the silence once. Pushing for more could affirm his role, honor the bond that drove them. But overstepping risked the unit's cohesion, her own evaluation. "Yes, sir. With grid coordinates from the logs he could sweep. No false positives in contested terrain." Reed's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Noted. Colonel approves a controlled follow-up. You and Rex, supervised. No independence." They moved out by 0800, convoying to the original Thornwood sector, a restricted zone 2 miles out, barbed wire sagging under years of neglect. The Humvee bounced over rutted tracks, dust pluming behind, Rex secured in the rear with padded restraints, his head steady against the sway. Elena rode shotgun, map in lap, marking faded boundaries from the 98 overlays. The desert unfolded in waves of ochre and sage. The sun climbing to burn off the mist, radio static crackling with base check-ins. At the site, a chain of MPs had cordoned the area, yellow tape snapping in the wind like signal flags. EOD techs in Tyvek suits waited, detectors slung over shoulders, the air humming with their generators. Colonel Ellis oversaw from a folding table, binoculars to his eyes, his voice carrying over the comms. "Vasquez, commence on my mark. Grid echo, north to south." She unclipped Rex, harness snug, and gave the hand signal, "Work." He moved out low, paws sinking into the soft sand, nose questing in tight arcs. Elena followed at flank, radio mic clipped, her boots tracing his path. The heat built quickly, sweat beading under her collar, the creosote's sharp tang mixing with the earth's dry exhale. Rex worked without pause, quartering the plot, his focus unbroken by the observer's murmurs. 20 minutes in, he stiffened, circling a depression near a thorn thicket. Paws dug, sand arcing in steady flights, a low whine building in his throat. Elena knelt, marking the spot with a flagged pin. "Contact, sir. Strong indicate." Techs swarmed, probes sinking into the soil with metallic thuds. They unearthed another canister, twinned to the first, seals intact but pitted, markings aligning with the logs. Ellis approached, face impassive under his cap. "Good work. Pull samples for lab. Vasquez, stand by for debrief." As the team secured the find, Ramirez radioed from the perimeter. "Visual on fragments, sir. Glass shards consistent with vials." The revelation rippled, not one oversight, but a pattern. Elena felt the moral weight settle deeper. Obedience had unearthed proof, but silence now shielded the chain's flaws. Rex sat at her side, panting steadily, his eyes on the dig as if urging continuation. Back at base by midday, the ops tent buzzed with analysts cross-referencing data. Hale pulled Elena aside, voice low amid the clatter of keyboards. "This escalates. Jag's recommending full board. Interviews with retirees. Your demo strengthens the case, but expect pushback. Brass protects its own." She nodded, the leash firm in her hand as Rex leaned in. "Understood, sir. Rex doesn't choose sides. He finds what's there." Afternoon faded into scheduled maintenance, cleaning harnesses in the kennel sink, the soapy water swirling with grit down the drain. The unit gathered for evening muster, faces etched with the day's revelations, but Reed's brief was terse. Progress noted, containment holds, questions through channels. In the quiet of her bunk that night, Elena reviewed the maps by flashlight. Rex curled at the foot of the cot, his breathing a steady anchor. The dig had forced the file wider, exposing threads of negligence that could unravel careers. Her conscience tugged. Report fully, advocate for the exposed, or yield to the order's tide. The desert wind sighed outside, carrying the faint echo of unearthed secrets, as the institution's reckoning inched toward public light. The hum of the base's generators provided a constant undercurrent as Elena Vasquez entered the briefing room the next morning, the door's hydraulic hiss sealing behind her like a vault. The air inside was cooler than the rising desert heat outside, carrying the faint acrid scent of dry erase markers and photocopied paper. Rex padded at her heel, his nails clicking softly on the linoleum, leash loose in her hand. The room held a sparse assembly, Colonel Ellis at the head table, Major Hale flipping through a binder, and 2 additional JAG officers, captains from Fort Bragg, their uniforms starched and unfamiliar. A projector screen displayed a timeline of Project Thornwood, red arrows linking the 1998 trial to the recent finds. "Attention!" Ellis commanded as she approached, the chairs scraping as the officers rose. Elena saluted sharply, Rex sitting automatically beside her, his gaze sweeping the room with quiet vigilance. "At ease, Sergeant. Take a seat." She complied, folding into the metal chair, the frame cool against her back. Rex settled at her feet, his warmth a subtle reassurance amid the formality. The colonel's face was drawn, lines deeper from the accumulated briefings, his patrol cap resting on the table like a sentinel. "We're expanding the board. Retiree interviews start today. Major Harlan Greer, the original project lead. He's en route from Tucson. Your role, observe and corroborate Rex's capabilities if needed. No direct input unless questioned." Hale leaned forward, his voice measured over the rustle of pages. "The second canister's analysis confirms volatility, trace dioxins leaching into the soil, EPAs pushing for a full environmental assessment, but commands holding at internal review. Disclosure risks lawsuits, base closures. We need airtight chain of custody from 98. Elena nodded, her eyes on the screen where faded manifests listed Greer as signatory on the disposal logs. The moral knot in her chest tightened. Greer's signature had certified the site clean, yet Rex's nose had proven otherwise. Obedience demanded she recite facts, let the lawyers dissect the past, but the bond with her partner, forged in the unforgiving sands of deployments, whispered of deeper accountability. If negligence had poisoned the land, it tainted every soldier who'd trained there since. The door opened again, admitting Captain Reed and Specialist Ramirez, their boots echoing in the confined space. Reed carried a secure tablet, nodding to Elena before taking position at the wall. "Units on standby, sir. Perimeter secure." "Good," Ellis replied. "Vasquez, walk us through Rex's second indicate, for the record." She recounted it precisely. The grid coordinates, Rex's quartering pattern, the whine that signaled commitment. Her words flowed even, trained by countless after-action reports, but she felt Rex's subtle shift, his ear flicking toward the officers as if sensing the scrutiny. He locked on at 23 meters, dug to 18 inches. No environmental interference, wind steady at 5 knots. Hale jotted notes, then projected a map overlay. Thornwood's original boundaries, dotted with potential burial points from the logs. If Greer's testimony aligns, we close this quietly. If not... He trailed off, the implication hanging like radio static. By 1,000 hours, the retiree arrived. Major Greer was a shadow of the man in the archived photos, stooped shoulders under a civilian polo, white hair cropped short, eyes wary behind wire-rimmed glasses. MPs escorted him to a side room for the formal interview, but Elena caught a glimpse through the partition, his hands trembling slightly as he accepted a water bottle, the plastic crinkling in his grip. The board reconvened after lunch. The mess hall's earlier clamour of trays and low chatter replaced by the briefing room's tension. Ellis stood, arms crossed. Agrees cooperative but evasive, admits to authorizing burial for operational security, claims samples were neutralized, denies knowledge of leaks, but his logs don't match the manifests, 2 canisters unaccounted for. Ramirez shifted in his seat, voice low but clear. "Sir, if he buried live agents to dodge audits, that's more than dereliction. It endangers the unit, our dogs, the ranges." "Speculation ends here," Reed interjected, his tone a whip-crack. But Elena saw the flicker in his eyes, the same doubt she'd buried since the first dig. Rex whined softly under the table, paw tapping her boot, a rare break in his discipline, mirroring the room's undercurrent. Hale addressed her directly. "Sergeant, Greer's requesting a demo, wants to see the dog that resurrected his project. Controlled setting, yard beta, your call on proceeding." The request landed like an order wrapped in courtesy. Elena glanced at Ellis, who nodded once. Proceed, but supervised. This tests veracity, not theatrics. They moved to the yard under a sky turning brass with midday sun, the chain-link fence rattling as a gust swept through. Tex had prepped a mock site, buried simulants laced with faint chemical traces, coordinates from Greer's era. Elena unclipped Rex, signaling work with a flat palm. He advanced, nose low, the desert floor's heat radiating up through his pores. Observers ringed the perimeter, Greer in a folding chair, face pale, Hale's notebook open. Rex quartered methodically, pausing at the first marker, then circling wider. At the second, he dug, claws efficient, unearthing the canister proxy. Elena marked it, voice steady over the radio. Indicate confirmed. But Rex didn't stop. He pressed on, whining toward a third spot unmarked on the grid. Sand flew in arcs, his intensity building until he sat firm, alerting on nothing the logs predicted. Tex probed, extracting a soil sample. Positive for residual contaminants. Unlogged from the 98 cleanup. Greer's composure cracked. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. That's impossible. We certified that sector. Hale's pen paused. Your certification, Major, yet here we are. The revelation rippled outward, MPs tightening the cordon as whispers spread to the unit watching from afar. Elena knelt beside Rex, hand on his flank, feeling his steady breaths amid the chaos. The demo had exposed more than soil, a lie in the chain, one that public reckoning could no longer contain. JAG would push for transcripts, notifications, the Army's facade of order fracturing under the weight of truth. Back in the ops tent, Ellis dismissed the group with clipped efficiency. Vasquez, report to kennels, light duty resumes. But as she led Rex away, Ramirez fell in step, voice hushed. That was no fluke. Greer's sweating means the file's rotten deeper. She kept her eyes forward, the leash humming in her grip. Chain handles it, Ramirez. We follow. Yet in the kennel's shadowed runs, as she hosed down the enclosures, water sluicing over concrete in rhythmic sheets, the dilemma clawed deeper. Rex had unearthed proof beyond orders, forcing the institution toward justice, but staying silent now while the board deliberated felt like burying her own conscience. The afternoon sun slanted through the slats, warming Rex's coat as he watched her work. Outside, the base thrummed with the first murmurs of escalation, external auditors inbound, the 20-year file cracking open to daylight. Elena's loyalty to the bond demanded she stand firm, even as the chain pulled taut, testing the cost of integrity in silence. The slosh of water against the kennel walls provided a steady cadence as Elena Vasquez coiled the hose, the rubber kinking under her grip with a soft hiss. Rivulets traced paths across the concrete, carrying away the day's dust and leaving behind the clean scent of damp earth. Rex watched from his run, head tilted, his black eyes reflecting the late afternoon light slanting through the chain link. She latched the gate behind her, the metal clanging with finality, and wiped her hands on her trousers, the fabric absorbing the moisture without complaint. The base's evening hum filtered in, distant rotor blades chopping the air, the sharp call of a sergeant drilling his squad on the parade ground. Routine held, even as the undercurrents of the Thornwood Review swirled like sand in a gust. "Sergeant Vasquez!" A voice crackled over her radio, pulling her from the task. It was Captain Reed, his tone clipped as always. "Report to the command center. External teams arrived. Bring Rex." "Yes, sir," she replied, thumbing the mic. She clipped the leash to Rex's collar, the snap echoing in the quiet enclosure. He rose fluidly, muscles rippling under his coat, and fell in at her side as they stepped out into the fading sun. The path to the command center wound past the motor pool, where mechanics clanged tools against engine blocks, the metallic ring punctuating the air. Elena's boots crunched on the gravel, syncing with Rex's paws, a rhythm that grounded her amid the mounting scrutiny. The second canister's unlogged contaminants had tipped the scales. What had been an internal probe now drew eyes from beyond Fort Huachuca. EPA liaisons jagged from the Pentagon. Even a low-level media inquiry deflected at the gate. The command center was a reinforced bunker of concrete and steel, its doors guarded by MPs whose salutes snapped like flags in wind. Inside, the air was cooler, laced with the ozone tang of electronics and the faint bitterness of machine-brewed coffee. Colonel Ellis stood at a conference table ringed by folding chairs, his broad frame casting a shadow over maps and laptops. Flanking him were 3 civilians. An EPA specialist in khakis, her notebook open to annotated grids, a JAG captain from DC, his suit jacket slung over the chair back, and a wiry auditor from Army Environmental, glasses perched low on his nose. Major Hale hovered nearby, coordinating printouts, while Reed leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Attention on deck!" Reed barked as Eleanor entered. The group rose partially, a murmur of acknowledgments rippling through. Rex sat immediately, his presence drawing glances, curious, appraising. "At ease," Ellis said, gesturing her forward. "Sergeant, this is Ms. Harlan from EPA, Captain Ruiz from JAG, and Mr. Kessler from Environmental. They've reviewed the prelims. Your dog's integral to their assessment." Elena saluted crisply, then nodded to each. "Sergeant Vasquez, K-9 handler. Rex is ready, ma'am, sirs." She kept her voice level, eyes forward, though she felt the weight of their stares, like inspectors sizing up a rifle's bore. Harlan stepped closer, crouching slightly to meet Rex's gaze. "Impressive. We've got soil cores from both sites showing dioxin levels above thresholds, leaching into the aquifer. If this ties to the 98 burial, it's a Superfund candidate. We need to verify detection patterns for the full sweep." Kessler adjusted his glasses, tapping a tablet. "And chain of custody gaps. Greer's interview flagged inconsistencies. Samples disposed without witnesses. Your demo yesterday closed one loop, but we require documentation. Handler logs, training certs." Ruiz, the JAG captain, interjected smoothly. "Legally, this escalates to potential fraud. Reopening the file means subpoenas for retirees, notifications to affected personnel. Sergeant, your testimony could corroborate. Walk us through the initial find." Elena recounted it methodically, from the drill's start to Rex's indicate, her words precise as a field manual. Rex shifted once, nose twitching toward the maps where faint chemical diagrams glowed on a screen. The group listened in silence, Harlan sketching notes, Kessler cross-referencing timestamps. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the vent grates, a reminder of the desert's indifference to buried sins. Ellis cleared his throat. "Vasquez, demonstrate for the team. Controlled alert in the annex yard, simulant from the second site's profile." She led them out, Rex at heel, the group trailing in a loose formation. The annex was a barren plot, cones marking sectors, the ground baked hard under the westering sun. Tex had embedded traces earlier, invisible to the eye but potent to a trained nose. Elena unclipped the leash, signaling work with a steady hand. Rex advanced, quartering low, his tail a level flag of focus. The observers fanned out, clipboards ready, the air thick with anticipation and the dry rustle of creosote nearby. He locked on the first at 10 meters, digging with controlled efficiency, paws throwing sand in neat arcs. Elena marked it, radioing, "Contact 1, sir." Harlan murmured approval, Ruiz jotting furiously. Rex pressed on, undeterred, alerting to the second, a deeper embed, his whine cutting the quiet like a blade. But at the third, he circled wider, beyond the prepped grid, sitting firm on undisturbed earth. Elena's pulse quickened. This echoed yesterday's anomaly. "Probe it," Kessler directed, and EOD techs moved in, detectors beeping. The core came up positive, residuals matching Thornwood's signature. Uncharted in the logs. Harlan's eyes widened. This sector was certified clean. How? Greer's name hung unspoken, the room's tension from the morning interview spilling into daylight. Ruiz turned to Elena. "Sergeant, your dog's overriding the records. That's evidentiary gold, but it indicts the chain." Reed's voice cut in, low and firm. "Containment first, no conclusions until full assay." But the moment rippled outward. Word spread through the base like radio chatter, the external team's find, the unlogged hit, whispers of Greer's evasion turning to outright doubt. By evening muster, handlers exchanged loaded glances in the chow line, steam rising from chili pots under harsh lights. Ramirez leaned close to Elena at her tray. "EPA's calling it systemic. Brass can't bury this now. It's public if claims hit." She forked a bite, chewing steadily. "We verify, Ramirez. That's our lane." Yet as she walked Rex through cool-down laps under the floodlights, the perimeter fence humming with voltage, the reckoning felt tangible. MPs doubled patrols around the sites, Humvees idling with engines' low growl. In the kennel, securing Rex for the night, Elena brushed his coat, the wet fur gleaming from a quick rinse. His eyes met hers, steady, as if affirming the path they'd carved. The next morning broke with urgency. Ellis's brief announcing the board's expansion, external auditors embedding for a week-long sweep. Harlan requested Elena and Rex for daily verifications, her notebook filling with coordinates that peeled back layers of the 98 cover. Jag subpoenaed Greer for a formal deposition, his Tucson home under quiet watch. Ruiz pulled Elena aside post-muster, voice confidential amid the armory's clang. "Your integrity's key, Sergeant. If you attest to Rex's reliability under oath, it forces transparency, notifications to 24 retirees, potential remediation funds." The offer tested her core. Obedience shielded the institution's flaws, but conscience, honed by deployments and Rex's unerring loyalty, demanded exposure. "I'll report as trained, sir," she said, saluting. "Facts only." Afternoon brought the first joint op. Convoy to an auxiliary grid, Rex in the rear, the Humvee's sway sinking with the team's resolve. He unearthed fragments, a shattered vial etched with ordnance stamps, drawing gasps from the EPA techs. Kessler radioed base. Pattern confirmed, multiple unauthorized burials. The news looped back, fueling base scuttlebutt, a junior officer's offhand comment to a reporter slipping past the gate. By dusk, a restrained press release hit wires. Army investigates historical environmental site at Fort Huachuca. In the ops tent, Ellis paced, face etched with the cost. "This goes public tomorrow, controlled, but it's out. Vasquez, your dog's the linchpin. Stand ready for interviews." She nodded, the weight settling like a rucksack. Rex pressed against her leg, his warmth cutting the chill of consequence. The file, 20 years sealed, now cracked wide, its contents spilling into scrutiny that could reform protocols or topple ranks. Elena felt the transformation stirring, not in heroics, but in the quiet insistence of truth, where loyalty to partner outranked silence. As night fell, stars pricking the sky over the digs, the base held its breath, the chain bending under the force of one handler's unyielding bond. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The floodlights cast stark pools of white across the command center's perimeter, their glare cutting through the desert night like search beams on a patrol. Elena Vasquez stood at attention outside the bunker door, the concrete still radiating the day's heat under her boots. Rex sat beside her, his ears pricked toward the low murmur of voices leaking from within. Colonel Ellis briefing the external team on the latest sweep results, his tone a measured cadence of facts and contingencies. The air hung heavy with the scent of diesel from idling generators and the faint, acrid trace of unearthed soil clinging to her utilities. MPs paced the fence line, rifles slung low, their shadows stretching long across the gravel. Inside, the room thrummed with restrained urgency. Harlan from the EPA pinned a final map overlay to the board, red markers tracing a web of contamination plumes snaking toward off-base aquifers. Captain Ruiz reviewed deposition transcripts, his pen underscoring Greer's evasions, operational necessity for burials without logs, negligible risk for untested samples. Kessler, the Army auditor, cross-checked serial numbers against the unearthed fragments, his glasses reflecting the laptop's glow. "This patterns across 3 grids," he said, voice even. "Not isolated dereliction, systemic oversight from the top." Ellis nodded, his broad hands flat on the table. "JAG's filing the formal reopening. Notifications go out at 0600. Retirees, dependents, local stakeholders. Remediation starts with site quarantine, full excavation by week's end." His eyes flicked to the door, where Eleanor waited. "Vasquez and her K-9 stay on verification. No leaks until the release." The door swung open, spilling light and cool air. "Sergeant," Ellis called. She entered, saluting Rex at heel. The group turned, Harlan offering a nod of quiet respect. "Your input on the aquifer traces. Rex flagged the leech. Can he baseline for the broader survey?" Elena stepped forward, leash firm in her gloved hand. "Yes, ma'am. With calibrated simulants, he can map plumes to 50 meters. We've run similar in contaminated zones overseas." Her words were clipped, procedural. But inside, the resolution stirred, a path where duty aligned with conscience, Rex's instincts bridging the gap the chain had ignored for decades. By dawn, the base awoke to a different rhythm. Reveille echoed sharper, pulling units to muster under a sky streaked pink. In the ops tent, Reed distributed sealed briefings, the press release drafted, media liaisons on standby. "This is institutional," he told the K-9 handlers assembled in ranks, their dogs sitting alert. "We own the floors, correct them. Vasquez, your point on the public demo, 0800, parade ground." She nodded, meeting Ramirez's glance across the formation. No words needed. The unit's silence held solidarity, forged in shared drills and the weight of what Rex had started. As they dispersed, Torres murmured low, "Greer's lawyered up, but the file's open, can't close it now." The parade ground buzzed with controlled activity. MPs cordoning sections, a podium rigged with mics, cameras from embedded reporters positioned at a distance. The sun crested the horizon, gilding the flagpole where the stars and stripes snapped in the breeze. Elena led Rex to the center, the grass patch quartered with tape for the demo. Observers gathered, base command, external auditors, a cluster of retirees bussed in for notifications, their faces lined with the surprise of summonses long forgotten. Greer sat in the front row, flanked by counsel, his posture rigid under a borrowed jacket. Colonel Ellis took the podium, voice carrying clear over the speakers. "This morning the U.S. Army acknowledges a historical oversight at Fort Huachuca. Project Thornwood, concluded in 1998, involved experimental defoliants. Recent environmental assessments, initiated by routine K-9 training, uncovered discrepancies in disposal protocols. We are committed to transparency, remediation, and justice," he gestured to Eleanor. Sergeant Vasquez and her partner Rex detected the anomalies. Their demonstration will illustrate the precision that brought this to light. She unclipped the leash, signaling work with a steady palm. Rex moved out, nose low to the embeds, simulants laced with dioxin mimics, buried shallow for visibility. The crowd watched in silence, boots shifting on the packed earth, the only sounds Rex's pause and the faint whine of his indicate. He hit the first at 8 seconds, digging clean. The second deeper, alerting with a firm sit. Elena marked each, radioing hits with neutral efficiency. Contact confirmed. At the third, the unlogged proxy from yesterday's anomaly, Rex circled once, then committed unearthing proof before the witnesses. Applause broke sparse at the end, more nods than cheers. respect for the discipline. The revelation. Harlan approached as Elena released Rex, her notebook tucked under arm. Your team's data sealed the assessment. EPA's recommending protocol reforms. Mandatory K-9 sweeps for legacy sites, army-wide. Ruiz added, shaking her hand firmly. Jags pursuing charges where warranted. Greer's deposition tomorrow. Your testimony strengthens it. Greer met her eyes across the group. A flicker of concession in his gaze. No defiance, just the weight of years exposed. By midday, the notifications rolled out. Letters to 24 retirees, detailing exposure risks and medical screenings. Alerts to local farms on aquifer tests. The base's public affairs issued updates, the story threading into national wires, headlines framing it as Army Unearths Own Past, crediting the K-9 unit's vigilance. In the kennel, handlers worked through the influx, extra verifications, gear calibrations for the excavation crews arriving by convoy. Elena brushed Rex's coat in the afternoon shade, the wet fur drying under her strokes, his tail thumping once against the run floor. Reed paused at the gate, clipboard in hand. Promotion boards noting this, Vasquez. Your report's model, loyalty without compromise. His tone held rare warmth, the chain acknowledging the ripple her integrity had sparked. Evening muster brought the unit together under floodlights, Ellis addressing them directly. Thornwood's closure teaches us, vigilance isn't just orders, it's conscience in action. Reforms incoming, environmental audits quarterly, K-9 integration mandatory. Sergeant Vasquez exemplifies that bond. She stood at attention, Rex beside her, the group's eyes on them, a symbol etched in the ranks. The moral tension that had pulled at her since the first dig resolved in quiet transformation. Duty and compassion intertwined, the institution bending toward justice without shattering. Careers would shift, Greer's likely ending in reprimand, protocols rewritten to honor the unseen threats. Elena felt the legacy settle, not in fanfare, but in the steady breath of her partner, the desert wind whispering approval through the creosote. As the base quieted, stars emerging over the quarantined sites where crews worked under portable lights, Elena walked Rex one last lap. The perimeter fence hummed, a guardian now vigilant. What began in routine sand had reformed the chain, proving loyalty's quiet power outlasted any buried silence. In the hush of discipline, a handler and her dog became the measure of the Army's enduring honor. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of Her Dog Started Digging in the Desert. What they unearthed forced the Army to reopen a 20-year file. See you in the next one.